when I think about the growth, a lot of it painful, but the growth that I've had in the past, I don't know, decade and a half, getting into business and then moving into larger and larger businesses. A lot of those periods of pain and struggle and not understanding and trying to adapt came from concepts that frankly I never thought that I'd have to learn or deal with or would apply to me. And today's topic is one of those things that you hear kind of colloquially, you see it on Facebook posts, or you see it in press releases, and you think, what does this really matter? And even when this topic for this podcast was being decided, I still in my head was thinking, like, is this really only applicable to giant companies, to Fortune 500 companies, CPG companies? And it's interesting, as we just finished recording this episode, how much of it applied to everybody. Whether you're a solopreneur that's trying to figure out how to start, a side hustle, to executives at Fortune 500 companies. It's applicable to everybody. It's going to be a great episode. At the end of this episode, I'm going to ask you for feedback, to get in touch with me and give me feedback on what you learned and what you thought of this episode. We'll jump into it now, and here we go. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Growth Gear Podcast. I'm your host, Tim Jordan, and hopefully today we're going to have another amazing conversation. I know that all of you have things that you could be doing besides listening to this, so it is my honest and sincere hope that you spend your time listening to content like this and walk away being glad that you did. It would be a travesty if we weren't trying to bring you stuff that was relevant and applicable and valuable to your day. Because it would be a waste of time. So we try to do that and hope that we're accomplishing that. And I honestly believe that today we have that. And I judge that based on the fact that I'm interested in the conversation we're having today. And sometimes I've recorded stuff where I felt like it was really great to get this content out and get different perspectives, but it's maybe stuff that I've talked about a lot before, had a lot of exposure to, and I wasn't like super gung-ho. That's different. Today I'm already excited about the topic that we're going to have because I feel like I'm going to be able to learn a lot. Before we get started, I want to give a quick shout out to our sponsor, the one that makes all this run, which is Carbon6. For those of you that are familiar with Carbon6, we've got a lot of stuff going on that's applicable to you that is new and innovative. We've got new content coming out all the time. If you're not familiar with Carbon6, but you are in the e-commerce world, you must be aware that Amazon is a big factor. And Carbon6 is here to basically create growth opportunities, whether you are hating Amazon and thinking, hey, I'm never even gonna sell on Amazon. We've got some stuff you probably need to look at. If you're selling on Amazon, want to scale and not sure how to do that, we've got tons of free content, resources, even free health checks and audits that we can perform for you. And if you're selling really well on Amazon, you probably already know about us, but make sure that you're checking out the new stuff that we are launching constantly, consistently, and with regular updates. So check out Carbon6 at carbon6.io. There is the quick sponsor pitch, and now let's get into our topic. So the topic today is really spurred by our lovely and wonderful guest who has more than 20 years of experience and is representing, the marketplace sales or online sales, she can correct me, for a $500 million company. And she's responsible for what should be this year 9 figures worth of sales on e-commerce marketplace platforms. So without further ado, let's introduce our guest, Summer. And Summer, did everything I say, was everything I said correct, or did I screw that up?
I wouldn't say 20 plus years. I mean, now you're really starting to age me.
You're right. I actually wrote, you said 20, I wrote 20. And I think that what happens is we try to pump each other up.
For sure.
So if I have 5 years, be at least 5 years of experience. But yeah, I realized I just made you sound older than you are. So my bad.
Listen, I hustled in college, so all of that work still counts.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to say when you actually started gaining experience. You could fluff the numbers and use what I like to call entrepreneurial math to determine, what that number is.
Yeah.
All right. So when we got started, before we started recording, I said, listen, here's the context of the podcast. Here's the premise podcast. Here's the viewpoint. Bring something awesome. What if you were sitting at a bar at the end of a conference full of a bunch of people in a similar business to you, and you're not talking about PPC, you're not talking about logistics. What do you have a conversation about? And you were like, company culture. And I was like, oh crap. That was my first response. Oh crap, here we
Crap.
go.
Why crap?
Rah, frou, emotional stuff. Now, after like
Oh.
1.5 seconds of that, illogical judgment in my head, I realized, okay, let's actually discuss the fact that people hate the idea of this first off. And I started thinking about why that happens. And like the first question I came up with, that this debate of like, why are some people turned off at the idea of even thinking about company culture, is in my head, there's this direct conflict of like, what do you have to sacrifice to get company culture?
Yeah.
Right. And I could be completely off base here. I'm just telling you full candor. That's why like my brain immediately goes to, oh, another company culture talk, because I think that I have this deep seated, maybe core belief, and a lot of other people do, that a really nice company culture comes at the sacrifice of harder work ethic or more focus or more demand. Right. Before we get anything else, do you think that maybe my preconception here, my like immediate withdrawal is
No.
uncommon, or do you think
No.
that's pretty
I
standard?
think a lot of companies try to say like our culture's great. Our culture's wonderful. And then you dig deeper, like, no, that is surface. Your culture sucks. Like, people are miserable. They don't have fun. They don't want to talk to you. They just want to get off. Like, pizza and soda on a Friday is not company culture. Like, it's just not. Companies are doing the bare minimum these days. And like, well, you get 2 weeks paid vacation, and we have a company holiday party. And every Friday, it's Summer Friday, you get up at noon, and that's company culture. And that's not it. Those are some benefits, but that's not the culture of the company. That's not the DNA. That's not who they are. Company culture comes from the top, and that can really be changed quickly should the CEO leave. So one of the things
Hold on. Don't go too deep. Don't go too
Yeah,
deep. I
yeah.
want to back up for just a second. So
Reverse, let's go.
yeah, I know that you're passionate about this, and and you're passionate because you were telling me, like I said before we started recording, that when you took on this role at Ollie, you were very, very particular about the role that you took on based on the importance of company culture and a correct fit. So I guess my question is like, why was that so important to you with this job hunt? Had it been important in previous job hunts to this level? What prompted this to become important? Like, give me kind of the backstory.
This has been my entire career before Ollie has been tainted with some form of misogyny or sexual harassment in the workplace. It started when I worked at Xerox. Yes, the copier, and there was rumors going around that I was having an affair with a married man because he and I went and got coffee together multiple times. He was happily married. I was dating someone. We had fun together. I wasn't interested in him like that, but rumors swirled around, and it was so toxic. Then, I worked at Radio Disney. I was a salesperson for that. I had someone recently send me a note. I hadn't heard from this guy since I worked at Radio Disney 20 years ago. And he was like, hey, I was just having a conversation with someone about like people I used to work with. And I'm going, oh my God, he remembers me. Like how kind. He goes, yeah, I was rating the hottest chicks I used to work with. You were number one. I was like, get the F out of here. Like, I'm sorry, can I curse? I don't know if I can curse on this. I'll be PC. But that was what I was dealing with at a company I was at that I loved. Actually, the culture was pretty good. I was being stalked. And I went to HR and I'm like, this man is stalking me. They're like, no, he's so kind. He would never do that. So I'm being gaslit and I'm being told I'm in the wrong. And I'm like, what? Like, I was nice to this guy because actually his manager said, hey, Summer, he's having a hard time fitting in. And so I took him out to lunch. And then after that, he bought me a Tiffany's necklace. He found who my trainer was and started working out with him. He found out where I lived. He sent me text messages and I finally had to say, it's him or me. Like, I am out of here. And they're like, well, we'll talk to him. And they're like, oh, we talked to him. He said he's not doing this. I'm like, here's the text. And they're like, oh, he is doing it. And it was things like that like there was just constant issues I was running into. So at the last company, so after Xerox, I went to an agency. I was a 33rd employee. This last company I was at is like employee number 6. And one of the problems with startups is the owner's very involved and they want you to work as hard as they're working. well, guess what? I don't get the huge payout that you get should this be really successful. And why should I work as hard as you're working? Like, what are the benefits to it? And I remember one guy, he said to me, y'all just want a holiday party because you just want to get drunk and have free food. And I was like, that is so freaking rude. How about we want to be appreciated for, I mean, you've been at agencies, you're at Carbon 6, like you get how hard agencies work. Like, be kind to your agencies. Those people work harder than anyone else. And to have a company say like they don't, like they're doing this for you, but they're not happy about it, they don't like it, it sucks. And I was sick of it. And so I spent a year looking for a new job. And I knew I wanted to stay in the e-commerce business, but I wanted to be at a company that not only I felt like cared about me and my mindset and my mental health, but also cared about their customers. And one of the things I found was I wanted to work for a B Corp. So all this research, I realized I want to work at a B Corp. A B Corp is a for-profit company that is certified by a B Lab. A B Lab is a nonprofit company that measures a company's social and environmental performance against the standards of the online B Impact Assessment. So it doesn't matter if the CEO leaves, what leadership leaves. If you're going to be a B Corp, you have to meet these standards, which means so many volunteer hours for your company. Who's your manufacturer and their environmental impact? What are you doing for your employees' mental health? So there are standards that have to be met every year, and they're tough, and they make them harder each year to gain. So if you ever see that certified and then a B in a circle on a product, you know that that company is a B Corp, and they are doing things within their DNA of a company to make their culture a better place.
Well, I've seen that. I did not know what it was. And then you also said something that's interesting. I guess logically I knew this, but I wasn't thinking about it in this context till now. But you mentioned that culture is not just the company's relationship with and for the employees, but also the customers.
Yes.
And I'm immediately thinking of like companies that I've been with or consulted before where the culture was very different between, you know, the way that employees were treated and customers treated. Could be either way. You know, the employees are always right. The employees are perfect, you know, take care of the employees, but screw the customers.
Yeah.
And then vice versa. So kind of an interesting thing there. I'll probably dive into here in a few minutes. But understand you were looking for a B Corp just because of those standards.
Yeah.
But when you're actually looking, when you're looking for a place to land in a job, like what specifically was important to you in that like cultural environment, right? Was there any one thing, or was it more just like a generalized?
You have to be able to work cross-functionally. And in order to work cross-functionally, each team needs to have a stake in your success in order to give a damn about what you're doing. You know, if I am trying to work with operations to get them to ship my Amazon product over shipping it to Walmart or CVS, what relationship do I have with them? And why would it behoove them to ship my Amazon product versus shipping a CVS product? And part of that is having company OKRs. And company OKRs are a great way to lead the ship of your company towards the North Star. And so your North Star is this big goal, and then each level breaks down to a more specific goal for that, you know, with that group. So e-commerce versus marketing marketing and sales would have different levels of goals. And when you work across functionally, you want to have an impact on someone's OKR, because at the end of the day, their bonus and their salaries determine on how well they are hitting these OKRs. And if you can build those relationships, it really helps to help you have a better career at this company. And it's transparent. So transparency is really key to me, and being able to see what finances OKRs are versus operations versus advertising versus brand, that is very helpful to understand like what is someone's goal and how can I support them in that, and vice versa. So transparency is a key one. So what are they sharing? And then their social media, like what does that look like? Their social media can say a lot about who they are. Are they cheeky? Are they fun? Are they serious? That I'm more of a lighthearted person, so I didn't really want like a very serious company when it came to their personality and who their brand is. A B Corp was obviously very important to me. And then employee benefits. So one of the things that really excited me about Ollie was they did mental health days. And it's not like you can just pick a mental health day and take it off. We have a Friday every month where the whole company is off. And that is huge because if I take a day off, that means on Monday, I have 8,000 emails I need to catch up on and decisions were made that I didn't agree upon, and it slows the whole thing down. But if the whole company is shut
so on your day off, you're sitting there worried, what am I missing? And you're actually checking your messages when you shouldn't be.
Yeah, exactly.
We're Carbon 6, we here at the time of recording here in August, we're having our first mental health or mental wellness day, I think we're calling it. And it was interesting, from a C-suite perspective, watching these really experienced, like people leaders, at the company, explaining this, because there's things I hadn't thought about, such as like not everybody can actually leave.
Yeah.
Like we're a software company, like we have to have people on standby, but
Yep.
even the guardrails in place to make sure that they're checking in and checking on emergencies, but not being hammered with stuff. And then they get, the following Monday off, for example. Right. So there's a balance there.
I mean, Ollie did the same. We were getting the last Friday of every month off, and that was too hard on finance. They're trying to, close the books.
Yeah.
So it's not fair to them. So then they moved it to now it's either the second or third. I forget.
Yeah. And then the transparency thing is important. And before I make a comment about transparency, for most of you that are listening to this podcast, you are founders, right? You're the entrepreneurs. And I know that Summer's kind of speaking more from the perspective of, hey, I was looking for a job as an employee, but I don't want anybody to think that the advice she's giving is just relevant if you're looking for a corporate job at a $500 million company.
Yeah.
Like what Summer is telling you is, she didn't say these words. I'm going to say it like, hey, I'm a high performing person that you want working for your company. This is how you attract me, right? Or this is how you keep me, or hey, this is how you get the most out of me. Because one of my biggest struggles when I've had, the businesses that I have or businesses that failed even was getting the right people on board, and then there's a lot of reasons for that. Maybe a lot of it was lack of confidence in myself. Oh, why would this amazing person want to come work for someone like me? But also I think of superstar people that didn't stick around. And it was a lot of times, the feedback that I got was not what I expected. And it is amazing how much people talk about transparency. And again, not just bragging on Carbon 6 because, Carbon 6 sponsor and I'm part of it, but Carbon 6 kind of blew my mind when I got involved at the transparency of, what's going on. Like you said, some even from a finance level. I remember, being on the exec team, I'm getting to see a lot of this stuff and thinking, hey, this is cool to see the future state and, what the goals are. And then we'd have a big company meeting and all that stuff gets talked about to every employee.
Right.
And at first I was like, what the crap are we doing? Why are we telling everybody
You're
this?
Scare everyone.
Yeah, you're going to scare everybody. But oh my gosh, it's the opposite. If you're doing bad, everybody knows you're doing bad. Or I shouldn't say if you're doing bad, but if you're in a challenge.
Yeah.
Everybody knows you're in a challenge. At least talk about it. Hey guys, we're all in a fight together. Let's win this. If you're doing really well, but people don't know that you're doing really well, they're going to assume you're not doing well. And that's not good either. Right.
Yep.
So there's almost no reason to be not radically transparent. There's some things that, need to be, kept confidential, but generally even financial transparency. I think that it creates a culture where everybody's in it together, everybody's winning together, and everybody, one of the core leadership principles we have at Carbon 6 is everybody owns Carbon 6.
Yeah.
And we mean that literally because every employee gets equity, starting day one.
I love that.
But the idea is we're all owners of this thing, So not trying to derail, but
no, but going to your point about I am at a corporation, Eric Ryan, who started this company, he made a change when they were growing so fast, and he overheard someone say, we just need a warm body and a seat. Because they were growing so fast, they were just hiring. He said, whoa, stop. From now on, everyone we hire has to do homework. And what that means is I had 8 interviews for this job. I met with 7 people, got interviewed, made it through them. They all agreed. My 8th interview was they sent me a packet of homework. And it was, I forget what the first 2 questions were. And then it was what would my title be? And I forget what the 4th one is. And I had to then present everything that I wanted to answer with. And so one, you weed out the people who don't really want this job. They're not going to fight for it. you get to see how people think. And is it, you talk a lot about a cultural fit. Well, is it a cultural ad, which is something we ask all the time at Ollie? Like, you don't have to be a fit. Are you an ad? Are you going to bring something new that we don't have in this culture and we should have in this culture? And so then you have to do this big presentation, and it really makes you slow down the hiring process. I hated it as someone who's trying to get hired. I hate it as someone who's hiring because it's so slow. But honestly, people stay at Ollie for a long time because you hire the right people. And that was at the beginning of the company that they did that.
And I'll, tattle on myself again. Without really any corporate experience or larger company experience, hearing that kind of thing, like we're going to make someone do 8 interviews, used to terrify me, because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, guys are trying to recruit awesome people, and all we're doing is make them work their tail off to even get an opportunity to come to the company. Like, are we actually chasing people away?
Yeah.
Like, heaven forbid we give them homework as part of their interview process, because then they realize, oh crap, I'm never going to have a weekend where I can like relax with the family. But what you're telling me, or what you're proving to me, is like, that's not the case. Like, that's a misconception. It almost like you trust the cultural fit for yourself because they are measuring twice and cutting once. They're doing their extreme due diligence. They're making sure it's like a perfect fit, where, initially my brain would have said, oh man, these guys are going to work me like a dog. This isn't going to be a good experience for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And you get to see the way in an interview, you scramble to answer a question, right? When you're given homework, you have time to sit there and they can see the way you worked out a problem. You probably didn't get the answer right. Mine was like, how would I work cross-functionally? Well, I don't know what all these people do, but I created a diagram of how I would work with people, why and how, so they could see how I break down a question in order to get to an answer. Doesn't mean it's right, but they can see how I work on it.
Yeah, which makes so much sense, because obviously you might not know the answer if you're not, experienced in that specific industry.
Yeah.
All right. Makes a ton of sense. All right. So, we could talk for like 6 hours about like the HR side of things, hiring side, all that stuff. But let me ask you this question. I'm going to go on another preconception that I have.
Okay.
I'm going to talk about this, I don't know if it's false. I don't know if it's true. You tell me, but this impression that when we focus on great company culture, and let me say, there is no such thing as, like, there's no single definition of company culture.
Right.
Like, some people love just this, like, hey, we're going to work, companies that are, stockbrokers on the stock exchange where everybody's making commission. The culture is probably more appropriately, like, we're just going to work like crazy. And, where there are other companies where the culture is different. So, I just want to say there is no true definition of the right culture for each industry or each company. There are variations. But generally speaking, when I think culture, I'm thinking transparency. I'm thinking, hey, give everybody, the weekend where you're not hounding them and expecting them to work so they can spend time with their family. Giving people recognition. You don't have to give bonuses for great work, just like public recognition, like all these things.
It's amazing how far public recognition will go.
Yeah. So the fluffy frou-frou stuff, taking care of people's emotions, taking care of people's feelings. There is this thought that pops in my head, like, if we are doing that, and I'm over-exaggerating, oversimplifying, please forgive me for that, but if we're doing that, there must be a sacrifice to performance when it comes to like speed and efficiency and tenacity and intensity, right? Because on a very basic level, if the company has to hit certain goals and we tell everybody, oh, you're taking last Friday off, well, that's, contradicting our desire to hit these goals. Like, it seems counterintuitive. So tell me where I'm wrong, tell me where I'm right, help convince me that it's not as simple as when we focus on culture, we are not as focused on intensity and success.
Yeah. I mean, I think of Ollie and it's so intense so often. And one of the things that Ollie also does that I love that adds to the culture is we don't have all hands meetings. We have family lunch. We have family lunch once a month. And family lunch, during COVID, they would give you $20. You could have lunch delivered and you could expense it, right? And they go over all the transparency, all the different, or financials, operations, like what's going on with the business. But then they also have someone from the company lead the call. And during the month of June, it was an LGBTQ focused call while also going over our projects that we're working on and being transparent. during February is Black History Month. And also throughout, not only do we have this family lunch, but we also have a group called, oh my God, what are they called? Why am I blanking? It's like the fun people. And it's like you can choose to be a part of this group, but they take like 12 people every year. And you have to bring in speakers every month to give talks about, we had drag queen bingo during June. We had an author come in, an Asian during AAPI month, an author come in talking about author/artist about how she does this work. And none of this has anything to do with making Ollie, get sales of our vitamin products. But what it does is that it educates their employees on different cultures and how to work differently, how to relate to other people and feel heard. And when you have that, you want to be successful. You want your teammates to be successful, and you want your company to be successful. And so when a company takes time to do things outside of just driving sales, it really makes you bonded to that company, and it makes you care more about the success of the company. And so if my only thing I'm getting out of this company is a salary, that's not enough for me. It is enough for some people, and that is totally fine. But when someone else comes to me and says, I'm going to pay you $20K more a year, I'm going to bounce that company. I'm like, great, I'm going to go to this one that's going to pay me $20K more a year. My new goal, if someone wants to take me out of Ollie, is much higher now, and not just based on salary. And I'm going to stay here and I'm going to hustle because of how much this company gives back, not only to me, but to my teammates and to our consumers. When I see the focus, our company does a ton with mental health. We work with a couple different charities, and we give a lot of money back to mental health. And they take time every year, multiple times a year, to say how they can focus better on mental health. Our HR is always sending out surveys like, how are you doing? Here's support that they can give you. And then they give you time once a month to not only have a day off, but another day during the work week to focus on something outside of just your day-to-day busy life at work.
I know I'm oversimplifying this again, but back to the question of like, is it counterintuitive to take a day off when we're trying to hit our goals? There's kind of a degree of like slow down to speed up almost. Like if our gas tank is always empty, then we're never going to be running full throttle. And if we're expecting people to run full throttle, most of the time we have to let them catch their breath occasionally.
You burn out.
Or people you burned out, you get frustrated, and emotions matter. If I'm in a meeting and I'm exhausted and I'm burned out and I hear one comment, I'm more likely to take that as critical when it might not have been meant critical. And then, now we've got this whole tiff between an employee and my communication's breaking down with someone. Like everything just starts to suffer.
So you had a podcast with someone at Prosper, and I forget whose name was, but you asked him as an entrepreneur, what is the one thing you wish you could go back and do over again? And he said sleep. He said he was only getting he was averaging 3 hours a night of sleep, and this is why. And it works just the same way. If all of your 45, 50 hours a week is just focused on this high intensity, you mess up. Mistakes are made. So throw in a family lunch, throw in a drag queen bingo, give them a break, because they will work that much harder for you. Refill their gas tank.
I love what you just said. It was you probably didn't even realize you said this, but in my mind, I keep coming to this question, like the balance between high intensity and softness, with company culture. You said, while you're working your 45 or 50 hour week, so like, I think you're debunking this idea that it's one or the other. Like, you want people in your company that are transparently all working towards the goals of the company. And yes, that might not mean everybody gets to work 40 hours, clock in and clock out. Like the best entrepreneurs, the best founders, the best employees, the best team leaders, that they don't. So I love that you're recognizing that it's not one or the other. Like there's a blend, right?
And there's time periods, right? Like, I oversee Amazon. Let me tell you, first couple weeks of July, and then after, I have been working so much.
Yeah.
Well, then it's going to, October's a lot slower. November's not that busy. December, I start ramping up again. It ebbs and flows. I'm not at 50 hours a week every week. I would be completely burnt out if I was doing that. Also, I'm not a founder. I'm not the CEO.
Yeah.
I'm not a C-level employee.
You're like the perfect one to be giving the wisdom to this audience, because we do have founders. We have, C-level folks that could take a lot out of, your guidance and your wisdom here. But also, even thinking about, when I first started businesses and it was me and 2 employees, or me and myself, like I wasn't even setting good culture for myself. I was trying to burn myself out. But then, really thinking about a lot of the mistakes and breakdowns and missed opportunities we had. A lot of it really was emotional. A lot of it was people feeling like they weren't appreciated. People feeling like, their ideas weren't respected. People feeling like even if their ideas sucked, they weren't at least thanked for bringing ideas to the table. And instead, they just quit bringing ideas to the table, which is a problem. So super applicable. Let me ask you this. If I'm going to assume that the majority of our audience are, medium-sized businesses, e-commerce businesses, agency owners, things like that, and they've never really thought about company culture, but they like the idea. They're like, yeah, I need to get my company culture in order for hiring and for retention and just for happiness and better efficiency and better performance. Where would you say people can start to identify what their current company culture is? Not what they want it to be, not the biggest mistakes they could be making, but like just do a health check. Like,
Yeah, do a survey.
Yeah, is that it? Just as simple as a survey?
I would say as simple as a survey. And if you do not have a person dedicated to HR, I know it's expensive, but in the long run, it will pay for itself, because hiring and firing is very expensive on a company. Training someone and then losing them a year later, that is expensive. You need to have an HR person that is a safe place for people to go to, that they can learn from, that's going to be the one helping create the culture, but they need to work with the C-level, they need to work with the founder and make sure that they are showing that it's okay to take the weekend off, that they're not emailing over the weekend, other than like urgency. I mean, that's very different. I'm just talking general things. Emails aren't going out after 6 p.m. during the week, even 5 p.m. Like they're cut off, set the setting on Outlook and it delivers at 8:30 a.m. the next day. Because the founders are who everyone is looking up to for guidance. And if they are not showing how they want the company to be, at least outwardly, employees notice that. And so on our podcast, we had an HR person come on and they just talked about, really outlined the cost of not hiring someone to manage HR in the long run really hurts companies, and that companies take too long to hire someone within HR. And just HR. Do not make this person do HR and finance and oversee, like their whole focus needs to be HR.
Yeah. And, I guess the perception is that HR is just about setting rules and making sure everybody follows the handbook. But, we have a VP of people.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of her job is just advocating for our staff and,
Yes.
kind of being a high performance coach, as
Yes.
opposed to just, hey guys, here's a new policy. And man, it's so important. I don't remember what the series is. Maybe it's an HBO series, Suits or Billions or something, with the guy and he's got the psychologist on staff, and like all she's doing is pumping up all of the traders on the floor, just helping them
Yeah.
like find their groove. And it seems frou-frou and raw, which sometimes we think is not good, but like makes people perform better. So
don't dismiss mental health. You look at some of the best performing athletes and teams, and they have psychologists on staff to help these high performing athletes, because if your mental health isn't there, you cannot be a high performing employee, period. It just doesn't work.
Very true. Good advice. Let's assume you're talking to a bunch of folks that are scaling their companies, have never really given a hard, serious thought to analyzing, addressing, improving, and fostering great company culture. What's like the last thing you would stand up on your soapbox and say to them?
You have to put your ego aside. And I think that's the hardest things for founders to do. And I have met very few that have been successful at that. You have to put your ego aside and when you're asking for this feedback, you have to genuinely take it and not dismiss it. I see too many people dismiss employees' unhappiness as a one-time thing, or they are stuck on this, or that's not how it happened. Like, period. The perception is the reality. And you need to put your ego aside and be like, what can I do to make this better?
Great. So you said you have a podcast. Let's shout that out, because I'm sure that there are lots of people listening and go, oh, I'd like to hear more from Summer. Where can they find more about you? And this is separate to what you're doing at Ollie. This is like
it's my own
passion project that you just are trying to put out to the multiverse.
Yeah, when I left agency world and went into the brand side, I missed like working with agency people and being able to throw ideas around and vent about like the problems that we're having. So I teamed up with my co-host Scott Oshman to do Always Off Brand. It's an e-commerce podcast where we take e-commerce and we simplify it, we break it down. We have people on from Amazon, Walmart, email masters, across the board. So there's something for everyone on that podcast. It's a lot of fun.
So what was the name of it? And I assume there's a website they can go to?
Yeah, it's Always Off Brand. You can find it on Sirius. You can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. You can find it.
Got it. Awesome. Well, I've got a lot to think about. I'll show you my page of notes.
Woohoo!
It's a lot of notes that I made. So I'll probably be thinking about something later on, and I'll send you a message, say, hey, help me understand this better.
Yeah, happy to.
Thank you so much for being on. And for those of you that are listening, love to hear feedback from you. Wherever you're listening to this, any of the podcast platforms, you can leave reviews. You can also go to growthgearpodcast.com and find a way to contact us. You can find me on LinkedIn. Pretty easy to find on LinkedIn. Shoot me a message. Let me know what you think. And, send me a request. Hey, I'd love to hear more about this. I have this question. Can you find someone with an amazing amount of experience to share their wisdom on that? I want to be interactive and here to serve you, the listeners. So give me feedback, give me criticism, give me encouragement. Let me know what you want to hear, and we'll cater towards those demands that you make, so to speak. So we'll sign off now. Thank you so much, Summer, for being on. Thank you, listeners, and we'll catch you guys on the next episode.